So as I mentioned, this is the first look panel of Mouse PI for Hire. If you've seen any gameplay, any trailer, any footage, and you're at all interested in Mouse PI for Hire, this is the panel for you. We're going to start from the beginnings, from the origins. Where did the initial idea for Mouse PI for Hire come from? And we'll be going to the prototype, game design, sound, animation, art, and everything you could possibly ask for. So where did it all begin? Where was that initial idea coming from?
Yeah, so the beginnings were actually pretty humble, as it tends to be. So many, many years ago, our art director, Michal, or Michael, if you will, who's also our 2D animation lead, he was just lurking online, and he stumbled upon this Bioshock fan art that you can see here. It was created by an artist known as Liz the Biz, and this picture has been burned into his mind ever since. So just a couple of years ago, while working on a completely different project, he reminded himself about this picture for a reason only he knows. And he went back online, he dug it up, and he said to himself, well, I do love Bioshock, I do love rubber hose animation, so why is nobody developing a game like this?
That's a good question.
Yeah, so actually with this idea, just an idea, he approached Mateusz. Mateusz loved the idea too, so banded with just a handful of people, they started working on a prototype. And the very first results you can see on the left side here. This is like the very first screenshot of the very first prototype.
Wow.
Pretty rough, pretty rudimentary, very simple, far different from what you have seen and from what you will see in just a couple of minutes. It was done in Godot engine back then, but it still has some mouse DNA in it, like already.
Absolutely, go ahead.
And still it's playable. We have hidden.
Well, hold on. You still have that initial prototype?
Yeah, we have the initial prototype.
Can I play it one day? Is that possible? That's awesome. And how cool is it to go from this prototype to where the game is now? With the gameplay that we've seen, the trailer, and also we'll be talking about as well, all the footage that you're seeing, it's still early days, the game is still in development, but those were the origins of Mouse PI for Hire. And now, let's talk about the virality of Mouse PI for Hire. When you started talking about it online, when you showed it, what was that process like? What happened at that stage?
So it basically started in December 2022 when we posted our very first tweet. It gained some traction, but it wasn't a major thing. And when it really took off was just a couple of months later when David, our lead engineer, who's also a TikToker himself, he posted some snippets of his work onto his account. It worked great for us because it gained millions of views, and we were quite shocked about it. But at this point, we already knew, all right, this is something cool, people like it, we need to pursue it full force.
And what was the consequences or the aftershock of that when that started to go viral?
I remember that he told me if we will gain 40,000 views, it would be great. And after one day, we had 25,000. 25,000, and in another 24 hours, we gained 1 million views. Yeah, so
wow.
It went viral. It was crazy. And I remember it was Tuesday morning, and I got the email from IGN, and they asked me, do we have any trailer? And we didn't. So during the night, during working over hours, and during the weekend, we created a Steam page to gain the whole property and to put them to that Steam page. And then I sent a trailer to IGN. They want exclusivity. I didn't know what that meant then. So after this, we got millions of views at IGN. It was most watched video at that time. So it was overwhelming.
So when they reached out to you, you didn't even have a trailer. And how many days did it take you to pull together that trailer?
2 days.
For those, this stuff usually takes weeks, if not months, and in 2 days you pull together a trailer, and it did that well.
Yeah, and my email broke basically because I got hundreds of emails from the press, investors, publishers. Everyone wanted to know more about Mouse, and we were back then on early stage of development. It was only a concept demo, let's say. And after this, we started the proper production. Not the proper production, but we started preparing the demo for the publishers because we knew that we need a publisher. And
Did you expect any of this? Like, honestly, not just for it to go this viral, but to be here at PAX Australia presenting, to be at Gamescom. Did you expect
None
this?
of this. Like, in our wildest dreams, we would have never imagined sitting here.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's quite overwhelming, but also pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so look, we've talked about the origins. We've talked about when PI for Hire was first talked about online and the virality, but what actually is Mouse PI for Hire? It's, of course, a fundamental question. How would you describe the game?
Yeah, so many people tend to call Mouse just a cool art project. Others seem to call it just another typical run-of-the-mill boomer shooter. And we understand where that is coming from. Because obviously we are leaning heavily on art. We are also focused on all the key elements that make an FPS game actually fun. But we want to, we want this to be the basis and build upon this, expand this. So we are using Metroidvania elements, let's say unlockable movement abilities that actually allow you to backtrack to the levels that you have previously completed and access the previously inaccessible areas. We have weapon upgrades, NPC interactions, and their own side quest with meaningful rewards, some mini-games, detective elements like gathering clues, connecting all the dots on the corkboard, literally, so detective style, and actually a pretty dark, adult, greedy storyline. So while we do love this hook that we actually stumbled upon online, it was commented by someone that Mouse is as if Doom and Cuphead had a baby, because it sounds so cool, right?
Yeah.
But actually, Mouse is much, much more than that.
Yeah, when I found this comment, I asked Michał, he need to prepare the art. And you can see the art on the right side. There's a Doom and Cuphead have a baby.
That perfectly represents, that's pretty great.
Yeah, we occasionally use it, and we really like the art. It's not our hook, but hook is great. But from the start, we knew we aimed to find our unique path or niche in the genre. We knew that we wanted to create a unique FPS game, and we built a team just for that. And we hope that once you play the final game, you will see how we accomplish that. And really important, we are right now consulting the project with genre veterans, including lead developers of Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal.
Yeah, and their help has proven to be priceless so far. Stuff that right now seems to be obvious to us.
Yeah.
It wasn't a couple of months ago, so yeah, it's a great deal of help.
So that advice that you've been getting from the veterans that worked on Doom 2016, Doom Eternal, I assume it has to do especially with how the guns are fired and the shotgun feels like a shotgun because, of course, they are the masters at that craft.
Yeah, like I'm crazy about gameplay, especially with the shotgun. You know that. I'm always looking for what I call the kind of feeling when you shoot it. So yeah, I'm really happy with what we have already.
Yep.
But still, we are building upon this. We are still improving this all the time.
Absolutely. So now, we talked a little bit about the gameplay, how Mouse PI for Hire differs from let's call it the typical boomer shooter. But what about even some gameplay here that, if you want to talk over this one, and what are we seeing right now?
Yeah, so some of this you have seen already, some of this you will see in just a couple of minutes. As you can see, some traversal options, some movement options, some platforming. Obviously, the cool gunplay, aforementioned NPC interactions, some pretty classic FPS stuff, finding switches, keys, avoiding environmental hazards.
Yeah.
Those cool reloading animations, we love them so much, we couldn't help ourselves. We wanted them to be here as well.
Yeah. So apparently you have one person that is working really hard on these reloading animations.
Yes, so we have, actually the entire team is tremendously talented, but we have this animator, his name is Igor, and actually he does all of the reloading animations because he has this great feel of how it should look like.
Yep.
He's very creative, and shout out to this guy because he does a great job, just like everyone else.
Absolutely. And let's touch a little bit and talk about the story and, of course, the protagonist who we'll be playing as. What is Mouse PI for Hire about?
Yeah, so the game takes place in Mausburg, which is a fictional 1930s American city. But instead of humans, it's inhabited by humanoid rodents, so mice, rats, and shrews, some other animals as well. And the city itself is slowly rising from a recent economic crisis with all ups and downs of such times, so gang chaos, gang violence, some political turmoil, tough times, basically.
Yeah, and even though our game is fully packed with humor and cartoonish elements, we are not avoiding serious topics like political extremism, racial segregation, poverty, or social inequality. In a way, you can tell that Mouse is a dark, twisted reflection of 90s, 30s America and interwar period.
Yeah. And of course, an important aspect of the story and the plot is the protagonist, who we're going to be playing as. Can you go into who we'll be playing as, and also who's to the right of the protagonist there?
Yeah, so our hero, his name is Jack Pepper, to be exact. Jack is a World War I veteran who became a private investigator after coming back home. And Jack has his vices, like most of us. So he has a bit of a gambling problem. Sometimes he shoots first and asks questions later. But he's always just. That's very important.
Yeah.
And as it tends to be in noir stories like this, Jack usually finds himself in some sort of trouble. But this time, it's way bigger than ever. It's actually a sticky fondue of celebrities, mobsters, some shady politicians, and a huge conspiracy aimed at taking over the entire United States.
Yeah.
But luckily, Jack is not alone here. Jack is assisted by Tammy Tumbler.
Yes, Tammy. Tammy is our hero trusted sidekick. She's a young mice orphaned as a child whose mother Jack knew. Even though she does not participate in investigation on gunfights, she makes Jack work much easier, as she's really great with everything mechanical, upgrading weapons, inventing new gadgets, improving the old ones. She can it all as long as you don't ask her to make some coffee. And really important information, Tammy is not a playable character at all in the game.
Right. So as we're playing the game as Jack Pepper, we'll see Tammy, as the game progresses, and she'll help us out.
Yeah, Tammy is really important to both the story and the gameplay loop.
Yep.
With the story, don't want to reveal too much, but when it comes to the gameplay loop, we revisit her every now and then because she serves the purpose of being Q to James Bond, basically. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, we visit her. She improves the gadgets we already have. She invents new ones. We can buy some stuff from her because nothing comes free. So yeah, she's very important. And like without spoiling too much, story-wise, like Jack plays the tough guy most of the time, but in reality, he would be kind of helpless without Tammy's help.
Yeah.
So it's good that he has her by his side.
Yeah, and it's nice to know that you made the connection that Jack knew Tammy's mother, and that's why she's helping him out throughout the game.
Exactly.
Yeah, actually, because like Mateusz said, Tammy was orphaned as a child, and Jack knew her mother. Tammy used to be kind of an edgy teenager, so Jack played kind of a guardian angel figure
Father
to her.
figure role.
Yeah, kind of like this. He took her out of trouble way more times than anyone could count. And obviously, as a teenager, Tammy did not like this, but once she grew up, she understood that what he did for her, he meant good. He always helped her as much as he could. So she decided to tag along and help him run the PI business.
Absolutely. Well, now we've got to talk about the obvious elephant in the room, the art style. The art style of Mouse PI for Hire. It's for sure what's gotten a lot of people hooked into the game, really wanting to play it when it eventually comes out. Can you tell us a bit more about the art style and also the inspiration for it too?
Yeah. So what many people tend to forget is that back then, in 1930s/1940s, many animation studios, especially American ones, adopted the style that nowadays we call rubber hose. So it was done by the Fleischers, it was done by Iwerks, and yes, it was done by Disney as well.
Yeah.
But what's really important is that there is no copyright protection of the style of animation. I mean, the characters of all these companies, yes, obviously, but we are not touching that. We have our own characters with our own style, and the animation style is free to use by anyone.
Yeah, it's really a big topic. We got a lot of questions regarding Steambound Willy, but when we started to work on mouse, Steambound Willy was under copyright protection. Yes, our game features mouse and rubber hose animation, but our work differs to Disney work in all the key points.
Yeah.
We develop our unique style when you take a closer look, and yeah.
You mentioned that it's essentially rubber hose animation, but reimagined for modern audiences.
Yeah,
Is that right?
Definitely. We want this to be a bit exaggerated because obviously the original Rubber Hose cartoons were exaggerated on their own. They were quite violent, actually. If you come back to Popeye, it's quite violent, actually. So we wanted to up the ante, actually, and to overdrive it a bit, overclock it, and make it even more exaggerated to like give away the atmosphere of the era for the modern audience.
Yeah. And obviously, hand in hand with art style is animation. I know that this has been quite a challenge for you in many regards. What can you tell us about the animation and how it came together with the art style?
Yes, so my background is in animation. For the last 17 years, I work in the animation industry. So establishing FUMI Games was really important, and we wanted to use our experience to create games. That's why we use traditional animation. This is fully 2D animated game. All the key elements of the game, like weapons, enemies, UI, is done by hand. So basically, when we start working on animation, first we create key animations, then we add in between frames, we clean up the animation, then color before implementing into the game engine. Really important information, we don't use AI or any other shortcuts. So everything is done by hand by our talented animators.
That sounds like a pretty long, laborious process, painstaking process. How long does it take to get that animation and the art into the game?
Yeah, from the production standpoint, it's really painful, and Maciej can explain this more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends obviously on what we are animating at the moment. Some simpler animation are done pretty quick. Some take way longer, but actually the techniques that we have chosen, they create a unique set of development challenges to us. Because once an animation is done and implemented, not much can be done about this. So when we are implementing any new mechanics into the game, during the designing and prototyping phase without the animation, we need to know as much about the parameters as possible at this point, and as much as possible about the values of set parameters as well. So stuff like reloading animation for our own, reloading speeds, for our own weapons, reloading speeds for the enemies, walking speeds for enemies, etc. We need to know this pretty precisely, because once the animation is implemented into the game, we can, of course, tweak it, like we can speed it up a bit, we can slow it down a bit, but only to an extent, because if we overdo it, it doesn't look good anymore. So we need to basically nail it the first time we implement it. And that's really tricky, because it's quite different to like pixel-based 2D and 3D animation. Obviously, I'm not saying that any sort of animation is easy. I'm not an animator myself, but still, what we are using is even trickier than usual. And actually, same goes for deleting any features from the game, because as you can imagine, it's quite a normal process to delete something from the game as we go along. And to us, it always means a huge loss if it's already animated.
For sure.
Because some time and effort was already put into it, and time is obviously the resource we never have enough of. So whenever we decide to delete something from the game, we always discuss if there is a way to salvage the animation anyhow, like if we can repurpose it, if we can redraw it a bit to use in different contexts. We have to be very careful with what we animate and when and how. So pretty unique.
Yeah, and if you want to change something in the design, for example, enemy, we need to redraw all the drawings. And sometimes it's hundreds, even thousands of drawings per enemy. So
could you count on one hand the number of times you've actually decided we're going to delete something because it's just not working?
Yeah, I'd say that it would be I would be able to count it on one hand, or actually good carpenter's hand. Yes, so we are very careful, and whenever we are designing anything, we discuss it heavily before we actually prototype it to just make sure that it fits into the game and minimize losses ahead of time.
Yeah, I mean, the work is in the pudding right there. We really appreciate all the hard work that you and all the team at FUMI are putting into it. But sticking on, and even here we've got some idle animation of an enemy.
And exactly, this is pretty simple. This is one of our bosses in the game, the Gator, or Vigatore, actually. And as you can see, it's a pretty simple animation. He's just standing there idling, and even creating something like that takes quite some time. So you can imagine that with more complex animation, it sometimes grows exponentially.
Yeah, and animation they have from 8 to 24 frames per second.
Okay, all right. And I'm assuming we're going to be seeing more, like with this particular character, maybe reloading and other things we don't want to talk about yet. All right.
It's only idle front view.
Yep.
We also need to make idle back, idle side, idle front left, idle back left, and so on and so on.
Yep, and this guy, we won't be showing like this today, but this guy already has like a full set of animations, and I can tell you that they're hilarious. So please just wait for it.
Just wait until you see
Especially
it.
the reload animation.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got to stick on the art style because we're not just dealing with 2D sprites here. We're also dealing with a 3D environment. How tough has it been to, I guess, impose these 2D sprites and 2D assets into a 3D world that we can all explore and play?
Yeah, so again, it's pretty tricky because there's no real reference point to us. I mean, there are black and white games on the market.
Yeah.
There are games that use 3D environment and sprite-based enemies, but there are no black and white games that use sprite-based enemies in a 3D environment.
Yeah.
So it was pretty tricky. And if you have seen our previous materials, you may have noticed that previously our environments were quite flat, quite simple, and to be frank, we were not really that happy about them. So what we did is actually we used a good couple of months to experiment with different lighting techniques, different textures, especially hand-drawn textures, some contrast here and there, in order to make sure that for one thing, that 3D environments work well with what we have in terms of 2D.
Yeah.
But secondly, and the more important goal there, was to make sure that players do understand what they're doing in the game, like what's interactive and what is not, where to shoot, actually, where to go, so player guidance here. And yeah, it was a huge endeavor. It's still a work in progress, pretty much, but we are very happy with where we are right now when it comes to 3D environments.
I'm sure the ability to not use color, sort of black and white, might make that difficult in terms of, is this an item I can pick up, or is this something I can interact with?
Yeah, we have to be very creative with outlines, with contrast lights, because we cannot use the world-famous yellow paint to do the standard color coding. So yeah, it's challenging, but once we actually achieved what we have now, I have to say it was pretty rewarding to the entire 3D team. Our 3D team is amazing, by the way.
Yeah, we use the same technique as people use in the 1930s. Of course, they didn't have computers back then, but they animated on papers. Then they transfer animation to celluloids. So the characters and all interactive elements, all animated elements are flat, have flat colors. We use the same technique, so if you take a closer look at enemies, weapons, they are filled with flat colors, and all the backgrounds are done in watercolor style.
Wow. And I know that I think we have some more footage here to show off these 3 environments a little bit more, if you want to talk through that.
Yeah, obviously, on top of creating the environments, like to make them look good, we are also we're looking always for the variety of the environments. So we have some urban areas, some industrial areas, some rural areas as well, in order to make sure that no one gets bored with the levels that we have in the game.
There's no way that I'm going to get bored with any kind of levels in this game, I'm telling you right now. And especially because what's going to be playing throughout the game, the music, what effectively can tie everything together with the game. What can you tell us about the music, the soundtrack that you've done for Mouse PI for Hire?
Yeah, so obviously in any video game, music plays a huge role. Mouse is no different here. So we have approached music, the soundtrack, from two actually strike points. The first one being some licensed music from the era that we are depicting, so 1930s, early 1940s.
Right.
But that's the minority. The majority of music is actually composed and recorded with a big band specifically for the project, because we believe that blending those two, like the original soundtrack and the licensed tracks, really give the atmosphere of how that era sounded like. So yeah, we're pretty happy with that. The music itself is going to be adaptive as well, which is always fun in a game. And as a cherry on top, we decided to go with an idea that was actually suggested by our community at some point. Yeah. So a couple of months ago, someone from our community, sorry, I don't remember who that was, but someone approached us and said, guys, it would be great if there was a filter to the music that makes it sound like it's been played from an old vinyl recording with the crackling noises in the background. So we took this idea. We went to Damien, our sound designer, and he gave it a thought, and he said, you know what? It's great, but I can actually improve this idea. So what he did is he created a system where you have a couple of different selectable music filters that you can choose from.
Awesome.
Yeah, and if you want your music in mouse to sound like it's been played from a really old wax cylinder, which was basically the first format of recorded music, you can have that, very heavy distortions. If you want this to sound like 1930s vinyl or a modern vinyl, which are actually quite different, you can have that as well. But if you want your music to be just clean, modern when it comes to the quality, you can have that as well. The choice is yours. We are always looking to give our players as much customization options as possible.
And we do have an audio sample to try and exemplify that. Just a small little clip. And please bear with us, because this little button in Google Slides has been giving us pains all week. So we apologize if it doesn't play straight away, but this is that small sample. Yeah. Do you see what I mean? do you all see what I mean?
Wait for it.
What we've been dealing with. It's like it was getting more and more authentic as it played along.
Yeah, and it works even better with headphones on, trust me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can't wait to listen to it. That 1930s, early 1940s Americana music takes me back. As a huge fan of Fallout, for instance, heavily using a game like that, I can't wait to experience it in Mouse PI for Hire. And talking about, particular inspirations, we've touched a little bit about Doom. Doom and Cuphead had a baby, as we mentioned, that was obtained from the internet. But this game has many inspirations. Could you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, so we are not afraid to admit that we are inspired by many different games. These are just a couple of examples here. Because obviously at FUMI Games, we are gamers. We have been playing video games for decades now, so there is a lot to be inspired by. So you can see some retro, older example, old school games like a personal favorite of mine, Exhumed, or Power Slave, as it was known in non-European regions, Blood. What else do we have here? Yeah, BioShock, obviously a bit newer game. Because, for example, Exhumed, BioShock, Metroid, they have those cool Metroidvania elements to them that we love so much.
Yep.
We also were looking for inspiration of the over-the-top violence, basically. So Blood, Bolt Gun, Iron Fury. Some modern games, obviously Doom 2016, like me mentioned. And when it comes to art style, at some point, yes, we have been looking up to Cuphead to see how they done actually their style.
And the important thing is that you've been inspired by each of these titles, as opposed to it's not a straight copy and paste. You've taken inspiration from this.
No, definitely. Whenever we are thinking of adding any mechanic that we have seen in some other game, it's not like we are just prototyping those mechanics, blending them mindlessly together, and poof, you have mouse. Because that way we would quickly get an unplayable monstrosity, and obviously we don't want that. So whenever we are adding anything, we always discuss if this fits mouse. Does it click basically with the game's world? Does it feel good with the rest of the gameplay? So we are, like always, you may have noticed that we are very careful about stuff.
Yeah.
So this is no different. We are very careful about any new mechanics.
Now, I've been told on stage to ask you about Exhumed. You said it was your favorite game.
Yeah, it is.
How much of an inspiration has that translated into Mouse PI for Hire?
Yeah, so actually when I joined FUMI and I saw the very first demo, it was pretty basic when it comes to mechanics.
Yeah.
So I said, well, why don't we give it a twist of adding unlockable movement abilities, because that's the basis for Exhumed and later Metroid Prime.
Yep.
And why don't we have this kind of Metroidvania style? Because Exhumed is actually probably the best game you have never played. As one of my favorite content creators put it. And it's basically Metroid Prime 6 years before Metroid Prime was actually released. It's quite a forgotten gem. It got actually re-released some time ago, not so long ago. So if you ever get a chance, please give it a go. It's an amazing game, amazing atmosphere, and amazing gameplay, even though it looks quite dated now.
And we got similar music from BioShock. You know, you've worked with Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal devs on the shooting in particular with Doom. It's all coming together really nicely, it seems. And now we're going to cover some key facts. So Mouse PI for Hire, it is developed by you and the team at FUMI Games. It is published by us at Playside Studios. And as we said, it's an FPS, action game, adventure game. It's also developed in Unity. Is that correct?
It is,
yeah.
it is. And we get that question a lot. Why Unity instead of Unreal Engine? Because that's the go-to engine usually for FPS games. But actually, in our case, Unity handles 2D sprites in large clusters way better than Unreal.
Okay.
And Unity guys, they have been extremely helpful when it comes to technical difficulties that we encounter. So yeah, shout out to them as well. Thank you.
And single-player game. And I have to give you the opportunity to address this on the stage. Does Mouse PI for Hire have any kind of microtransactions or game-as-a-service style elements?
The answer is very simple here. Hell no. Hell no.
Yeah.
You buy the game, you get the full package.
Absolutely. And I've got to get to this next slide, because every time I see it, it makes me laugh. What am I looking at here? Tell me.
Yeah, so actually, we have this running joke that this is our weapons testing facility in order to make sure that mice do like using our guns. But actually, it's just a picture that we stumbled upon online a couple of months ago. We found it hilarious, so we just slapped it here because it seems to be like quite a good joke.
Yeah.
But just so you know, no animals were or are being and never will be harmed during the production of our game. It's very important.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, the release date for Mouse PI for Hire is currently set for 2025. Mateusz, Maciej, thank you so much for joining me on the stage. We really appreciate it. And thank you to all of you, for those of you watching on PAX 2, for joining us for the first Developer Playthrough panel.